Welcome to America's Heroes Group.
And welcome back to America's Heroes Group. We are a globally connected roundtable discussion on military family matters with our partner and family caregiver, Keisha L. Jackson, on the line. And she has brought us a great guest. September is National Suicide Prevention and Hispanic Heritage Month. Today is Saturday, September 3rd, 2022. Our host is Cliff Kelley. I'm Sean Claiborne, the co-host, Army National Guard veteran. Our executive producer is Glenda Smith, and our digital media producer is Ivan Ortega of Scouts Honor Productions. Keisha, how are you doing today?
Hey, Sean, I'm doing well. How are you?
All right. You're a U.S. Air Force veteran and family caregiver, and you brought us today Miss Pamela Ferrell, a caregiver, activist, pioneer, and owner of Cornrows and Company. And she wants to talk about hair care in the military. But before we do that, I wanted to give a little bit of information to our audience. She's the first African-American documented to help shape hair policies within the U.S. Armed Forces. And if anybody has been in the military, we know that, particularly once upon a time, especially when I was in the military, that you couldn't even cut your own hair without permission. So this is something that is very critical and important in the military circle. And also, she also played a pivotal role in the 6th in the Army and Navy with their review of hairstyle policies and regulations, and developed the Circle of Hair system, which defines different textures of hair. The system was used in the 2014 presentation to the Army and is now part of the Cornrows Incorporated collection and in the National Museum of African American History and Culture. Welcome to our show.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me.
So,
hey, Sean, just before you get started, because I definitely want to give Ms. Ferrell just a complete floor to just take her time, within our time. But there's two things that I definitely want to mention, because I was in the military during that time, and I can share my stories of my experience of how I was challenged with my hair and the length of my hair or the styles of my hair, and was asked, was it in red? At that time was in 3510, all of the different things that I had to go through. But the other reason why this topic is extremely important to me, because I started caring for my mother when I was in the military, but also caring for my mother after I left the military. And so I always emphasize the importance of self-care for caregivers. And one of the things that I can say of people of color, and I know I experience myself a lot of times when we're caring for people, we neglect to take care of our hair. Mm-hmm. And so my hair was in a state of shambles to the point where I had bald spots because I was so nervous from the different things that was going on. So to be able to have someone like Ms. Ferrell to be able to come on, I am completely honored for her past, her present, and also her future, for what she's doing to lead the way for us in the military as well as for caregivers.
And I think that's really poignant. I remember when I was in the military, I cut my hair one time, and I was in, I think it was AIT, and they didn't like the way I cut my hair, and I just shaved it off to try to do exactly what they do in basic training, just make it all, low, basically. And because I showed up between two different formations with a different hairstyle, they wanted to write me up for destruction of military property. Because in the military, wow, you're a GI, you're a government issue military property. So and it was no joke. This was actually a very serious thing. This is something that is I think. So with that being said, Ms. Ferrell, how does hair translate to your identity?
Well, and it's interesting hearing your story, because I didn't know that. When I started out, the reason I started my business was because I lost my job when I was 18 years old because of my braided hairstyle. And I made a declaration that I was going to braid so many heads, this would never happen to anyone else again. And so that's how Cornrows and Company started. And we, years later, after we opened up, we put out a wanted sign saying that anyone that, experiences hair discrimination or that's threatened for losing their job because of their hair, call us, and we will pay your legal fees. We'll pay the attorney to represent you. And so we did get some calls, and it just really, it was in corporate America, and, private practice. So many people reached out to us because they were having problems with, at this time, it was wearing braided hairstyles. And one day I had a young lady come in who was in the military. She was in the Navy. And she asked if she could take my book and, to show them some of the hairstyles that were in there, to ask them whether they would change the grooming policy so that they could wear braids. And so, they reached out to me, and it was quite easy, actually, with the Navy. It took a couple of years. But the point that I made to them is, one, is our hair is different, and it has different needs. And particularly for someone in the Navy, it would be more practical for them to have a braided or natural hairstyle, if they were out and they were, on a ship for months, as opposed to, say, relaxing their hair, which was the other option. Relaxing your hair on a ship where you might not have enough water pressure. I mean, there's so many things that would be problematic. And so they got it. And they did eventually change the grooming policy to include braids. My experience with the military has been one of we didn't have to fight that hard, and for example, with the Hyatt Regency Hotel, Marriott Hotel, American Airlines, these other places, it took years, and we had to fight. In 2014, I got a call from a young lady who was in the Army, and she was just in a total panic. And she called and said, they just came out with a new revised grooming policy, and we can't wear twists. And she had been wearing her hair in twists for years. It's easy, it's practical, it's neat, it looks, it's neat under the cap. And so, she had me get on the phone with several other young ladies that were also in the Army, and they were just talking about different strategies. So now this is a different time, because the first one, the Navy, was 1993. So this is 2014. So we have the internet, we have social media. So it was, as I listened to them and they took it to social media and just how they had planned to approach it, I thought to myself, I am not going to reinvent the wheel. I am going to, I pulled out some letters that I had written in 1993, and I just revised them. And in fact, my son, who was 15 at the time, he thought I was crazy. He said, "You are writing a letter to send to the Secretary of Army," and it was another one. I don't remember who I sent it to. And I said, "Yes." And he just chuckled and thought, no one is going to answer you. So anyway, I send these letters off. What I recognized was the people that are making decisions, they're not necessarily on social media. Mm-hmm. They don't use social media. And so that's why I sent the letters off. And I got a phone call 5 days later from the Pentagon, and they wanted to speak with me about the letter that I sent in regards to hair. And they asked, did I want to come to the Pentagon, or would I like for them to send someone to me? So I said, send someone to me.
You don't want to go to the Pentagon?
No.
I would have gone to the Pentagon. Man.
I mean,
cool.
I just preferred to be in my own space.
Okay.
As I was talking about this issue. And it really turned out to be really good, because when the young lady came, I was working on a project, which is my Circle Here project. And they wanted me to come and do a presentation to 21 senior officials from around the country, a lesson on hair, because these were the people that would make decisions, I guess. And so I had 4 days to plan this. And I thought, why don't I use my Circle Hair to explain the difference with hair? I had decided that I was going to go in there and I was not going to talk about race, because this had nothing to do with race for me. Mm-hmm. This was simply about hair. Hair was the problem. And so I went in and I used the Circle Hair system.
What is a Circle Hair system? Break that down a little bit for us that don't know. What does that entail, basically?
Okay. So if we look at our hair, strands of hair, they're circles. And they come in different sizes. And so what I discovered for myself is that there is circle hair and there is what I call line hair, straight hair. There are more people in the world with circle hair. But what was happening, what I found, was that they created a policy for line hair. And that was really, when I went in, I was able to show them. I was able to show them the distinct characteristics of these two shapes of hair. And, what happens when they get wet. One stands up. Circle hair will stand up. It expands. And line hair will hang down. The difference in terms of if we do a wash and wear hairstyle with circle hair versus someone that does with line hair. And so because it was a conversation totally about hair, and I even put together these boards where I actually, stapled hair onto these boards. I used to hate these, they used to do them in school where the kids had to do their little presentation on these boards. And so that's what I use. In fact, those boards now are in the African American Museum collection, Cornrows and Company collection. And so, they totally got it because it was about hair. And they changed that policy. I got a call probably, I would say like a month later, telling me that the policy had been changed. And they said a policy had never been changed that quickly.
What made you think they changed it so fast? Why do you think they did that?
Because they understood it. They understood it because it was about hair and not race. It's hard to win arguments about race. No one will ever admit that they're a racist. Even a racist doesn't think they're a racist. They don't think that they make decisions based on race, but they do. And so I always know that is a harder argument to make and to win. And again, the problem is hair. So if the problem's hair, let's talk about hair. And they totally got it. And it was interesting because there were more men in the room than there were women. And so, men don't know all the nuances of hair that a woman, has to go through. They don't know that a woman with circle hair could straighten their hair and then go out and get caught in the rain and it's going to transform and do something else. They don't know that. And so, so for me, it was just an opportunity to educate them on hair so that when they have to make a, management decision on, based on someone's hair, they can do it and be more informed about it. So they got it. I think that's why they changed the policy. And I did get to go to the Pentagon. They honored me at the Pentagon.
All right. So what did you think about the Pentagon?
I got a special tour. I had never been to the Pentagon.
Wow.
And I got a really special tour there. So
I think that's really important what you've done because we can spend more time on being sailors, Marines, Army soldiers, airmen, guardsmen, things like that, as opposed to worrying about your hair.
That's right.
Spending an hour every day trying to figure out how you're going to what you're going to do with your hair. But go into the field, what you're going to do about your hair.
Yeah, Sean, and like you say that, I remember. I was saying, I remember that specific thing. Every day I would come into work, and I would ask some of my friends, "Hey, look at my hair. Make sure it's this. Make sure this, pin up." And it was an added responsibility that you had to do even before you can do your work. So that's exactly right. That's what I had to do as well.
Yeah, and you all serve the country. You work hard. Why should you have to go in? And I think it creates this insecurity. Feeling like, is my hair right? And that was the other thing I said to him. I said, you already have a policy in place. If your policy says that the hair has to be above the shoulder, then it shouldn't matter what the texture of the hair is. It shouldn't matter if it's braided. If your policy says that your bun shouldn't be extend out more than, I think it's 2 or 3 inches. If someone has a braided style, that's a bun, or if they have locks and it's neatly groomed and pulled back and it meets that standard, why are you singling out, certain ways that people wear their hair? And so, they have policies in place. And, as with everything, there is this idea that people in management positions, doesn't matter whether it's military or in corporate America, that they control our hair in particular. Because, they don't have policies that say you can't wear straight hair.
Right.
They don't have policies that say you can't have blonde hair. I mean, even if you're born with naturally blonde hair, I mean, that would be like crazy to say that, right? To create a policy.
If you don't have that experience, they would never know.
Right.
And then one of the things, like a lot of guys, particularly African American men, but not just African American men, but guys that suffer from razor bumps. So in the military, when I joined the military, you had to be clean shaven. That was a big deal. And then a lot of members seeing the struggle with a lot of young men who were first time shavers, who had these horrific razor bump outbreaks. Sometimes having to go to the hospital, having to go to the clinic to try to get these treatments for their skin because they had these huge blisters and bumps that looked like they were afflicted with some kind of disease, when there was really just razor bumps because they were shaving too close. But the military required that you have close shaven skin, so you had to have baby smooth face in order to report to formation. So has anything been done on that? I've noticed in a lot of the elite units, like the Navy SEALs and things like that, I know those guys are going around rocking these long bushy beards and things like that. Is that still something that is that soldiers have to do?
That I don't know. From what I understand, they've changed the policy, to take that in consideration, and men can wear beards. I don't know what the policy is in terms of how long it can be, whether they have to keep it well groomed and cut short, as opposed to being shaved very close. I don't have a problem with standards, but it should be a standard that everybody can meet. And it should be a standard that takes in consideration that, we're not this monolithic people. And when you talk about razor bumps, I mean, again, we're talking about circle hair, because that hair grows out in a circle, and in some cases, when you cut it incorrectly, it becomes an ingrown hair, and that's what creates that inflammation.
And then when you have people in the military, they can't really teach you that. And I remember seeing young. I was blessed because I didn't really have a beard when I was in the military. I was too young to really grow it. I had a baby face to begin with. So when I was in the military, I could rip out a big razor and I could shave once a week, and that was good. But for guys that had bushy beards, I mean, it was just, oh my God, it was just horrific. And some guys even had to miss training and get pulled back and redo training because they missed so many days because their skin was inflamed and things like that. So.
And it's not like they teach you how to shave.
Right, exactly.
You understand what I'm saying? It's just shave it by any means necessary. So can you imagine 18-year-olds not really knowing, what kind of razors to use and products and things like that? So
tell me, but going back to my original question, Ms. Ferrell, go back to my original question. So particularly for a female, for a woman, how does hair translate into your identity, like who you are, and then what does it mean to a woman? Because I know I've never seen a lot of these movies, but I know these movies are out there where there's all kinds of different coming of age movies where women, particularly black women, are cut off all their hair because they want to make a statement, or they get fed up with all the stereotypes and images that they have to adhere to try to become this image of beauty, and they do something to rebel against that and they make that symbol their hair. So how does hair translate to your identity?
Hair is really important. I mean, it's the first thing that you will notice on a person. When your hair is done, I know for me and for many, you feel good. So now we're talking a mental health issue here, Well,
you got 30 seconds, so we got to finish up quick.
Yeah, so I mean, hair is really important in terms of identity because it says who you are, and we all don't have the same hair, and so hair requires different ways of grooming it and styling it, And when you create a standard, one standard, and everyone is trying to meet that expectation, that's where, I think it's a hardship for women and people in general as far as their identity.
Keisha L. Jackson, U.S. Air Force veteran and family caregiver, and she brought us a great panel with a great topic and a historical person at that. That is Pamela Ferrell. She's a caregiver, activist, and pioneer, and the owner of Cornrows and Company. And thanks for joining us. We appreciate your time, and God bless you guys.
Thank you so much for having me.
This is America's Heroes Group. We'll be right back.